It's a lousy room on a lousy colony on a lousy planet in the middle of a lousy sector. Haktua is arriving back after a long day at the ore collection facility. He's so tired that he simply falls onto his nest, which is a lousy bed-type structure. Laying there in silence, he began wishing he could just relax like everyone else in the saloon. Perhaps he would purchase some company if that was possible. Yet in his situation, no rented company would ever come close to him. Haktua raises his body with his 4 extended limbs, turns himself over, and he stares on his back towards the door, wondering if tonight is going to be the night. He hears things moving outside of the door. He hears people moving around. He hears other creatures moving around. He hears everyone talking, seemingly oblivious to what was going on. Yet every time he heard what seems like bipeds walking, his nerves became on edge. So nervous he didn't even want to eat. He hasn't eaten in days. Eventually, as everything fades, he just screams in his head, "Just do it already!" He thinks about what happened. How the Tweaknapoles, an amphibious species very similar to his own, assaulted his colony. He wasn't around at the time, so he couldn't fight, although it's clear he probably would have died, as the assault against the colony killed at least 72% of the population, and the rest, almost all of them female and children, were placed in bondage. By the time he found out, there's nothing he could do. He didn't know how to track them. He couldn't fight, not well enough to actually take them out. His ship didn't have a lot of weapons at all. It was a cargo ship, for crying out loud. What was it going to do? What was he going to do? He didn't know. He thought for a very short time and realized that since he's unable to do anything on his own, he would ask the only species absolutely insane enough to face the Tweaknapoles, and that would be the humans. He went to go meet them. He knew he'd promise anything to free his betrothed and get her back to the colony, even though he hadn't even met her, but this was their way. He had to get her free. Haktua had to travel to a different sector altogether in order to meet the humans. He met the humans in a hidden part of the capital city of Alderaan. The humans all seemed to be there like statues, only moving when they had to, only speaking to get details, talking about price or anything like that. Some of them seemed to not even blink, as they seemed to be waiting for Haktua to simply move even the slightest little bit of wrong way, and they would have ripped all of his limbs clean off. Haktua bowed down in front, begging for their assistance, but the begs fell on deaf ears. That is, until he offered his ship, all the cargo on it, all the land rights from what he had, and everything that was on the land, anything, so that they could go in and get the colonists back. He showed them proof that he owned the ship, that he owned the land and everything. He told them what cargo was in it. They looked over everything with very, very scrutinous eyes. Eventually, the humans seemed to whisper to each other, almost seeming like they were talking in code, as the translator was picking up strange, not just sounds, but strange phrases that either didn't translate right or were not the human's standard speech. Eventually, the one sitting across the table simply said, "Don't you worry. We'll take care of this. Your offer has been accepted." With this, Haktua actually raised his head up for the first time since he got there and did his own version of a human smile. After that, things moved incredibly fast. Haktua had no idea that the human intelligence network was so robust. It only took about 30 human minutes for them to locate the station where the slaves were being taken and they were being processed, getting ready to be sold. This was not exactly the easiest of processes, as each of the slaves has to be assessed, then they have to be trained, they have to go through medical. It's a whole long process, so there is time, but time, unfortunately, is never, ever on their side. The humans flew into the station under the guise of prospective wealthy buyers, saying that they had enough materials to purchase all the slaves, trained or not. It didn't matter. They wanted them all for personal reasons. This was led with a whole bunch of different phrases and words that Haktua didn't understand, but he knew that this meant bad, bad thing to anyone that was still in bondage. Haktua wasn't around for the fight. He did get to see some of the highlights, though. He watched as the humans laid waste to the station as soon as they docked, blowing through the hatches and charging through in their mechanical suits. They went from doorway to doorway to hallway, room to room, clearing everything out. They killed anyone that stood in their way, ripping through bulkheads and doors with their giant metal suits, blasting even the strongest aliens away with weapons that they really shouldn't be using anywhere close to the vacuum of space. In one case, a hatch was sealed off. Two of them reached over with those powered hands, grabbed the hold aside, and ripped it clean off its moorings. And then they continued to slaughter anyone that resisted, anyone that was not in their contract. Once the prisoners were secured, they were all taken to the human ships. And as the human ships left, everyone believed that, they're going to know what happened. Everyone knows what human weapons do. But there was not going to be any evidence. As it turned out, the humans had set the station to overload its reactor and self-destruct. The resulting explosion would take anyone several human decades to collect enough evidence to find out what had happened. But since this station was off-grid, considered a black site, no one's going to investigate. When the humans finally landed on the colony world, they expected payment. That is, after they offloaded all the former slaves. As the last of the slaves was dropped back off on their original colony, the humans that had freed them looked around and found the promised ship, their payment, was in pieces. It looked like something had blasted it right in the center, taking out not just the cargo compartment, but the engines as well. It was destroyed, obviously, in the initial invasion, as foliage had already started to grow up the side. The cargo that was promised was just gone. A direct hit into the cargo bay left nothing but a smoldering hole, now shining of glass. The land, when they found it, well, it wasn't what was promised, was now shimmering like glass from all the artillery shells and all the orbital bombardment that came down. Not only was it glass, but it seemed as though it was poisoned due to the reactors all going critical around and all other power stations. All the structures on said promised land were not standing, at least not much. They were now just collapsing ruins. Haktua actually had no assets to bargain with. With his betrothed safe, he believed he could just wait on a distant world and wait for the humans to leave and then just go home. There was the threat that the humans would actually take the former slaves and sell them off themselves to cover up the debt. But the humans never took the former slaves as collateral. Haktua knew this, as that practice in particular will bring the wrath of all the other humans, which, as everyone knows, is a death sentence. Instead, the humans began to search for the one that owed them their debt, and they searched very intensely. So much so that Haktua couldn't stay anywhere near the galactic center, as every single time he checked in on something, he was flagged, and soon enough, humans would come. He was constantly moving under different names. Actually, the name he was under right now is Balgag. This was just one of the many ways he used to avoid detection. He had to study to figure out how to avoid the humans, which, oddly enough, these all came from what the humans call movies, or something they called CSI. He used every bit of knowledge he could find to his advantage. With this, he started becoming an expert on trying to hide, being able to hide in different areas for a surprisingly long time, but he would end up making friends. But every time he started to make friends and any type of work relationships, every single time, they would somehow discover that he was in debt to humans. Whenever they found this out, everyone stopped. It didn't matter what species. They all stopped and looked at him and eventually would pull away, many times literally at that moment. They didn't want to be anywhere near him. They knew the humans would come, and if you have a debt to the humans, they will stop at nothing to collect. And this would make him an outcast and eventually get him fired from whatever job. He realized soon that whenever they found out, he had to start making plans to leave. Due to this, he learned that he needed to keep everything to himself to avoid letting anything slip out. He didn't have any friends. He didn't talk to anyone at work. He just did his job, put in as many hours as possible just to keep himself busy, trying to keep his mental sanctity still there. However, now it's just work. That's all he has. He's tried to save enough stones to return, but he fears the interest. He has seen this on the human movies, that even if he saves enough to pay off his debt, they'll claim interest and he will become nothing more than their whipping boy, or worse, their punching bag. Just the thought of this makes Haktua not only work, but work like somebody who has a whip behind him, like a master is there waiting for him to slow down. Unfortunately, after work, he has nothing to do, since he can't hang out. He can't go and enjoy himself because he must save things. All he can do is sit in the silence in his nest, waiting for the humans arrive and take what he has. Then take what they want by removing everything, like his organs, out of his sphincter. Now he has no choice. He's sitting alone now with a body that curses every movement, every breath he takes. He once again wants to scream out loud, but has to scream into his mind, just get it over with already. That is the moment the door opens with a loud thud. Haktua jumps up and pushes himself against the wall with all four large humans standing in front of him, between him and the door. The light coming in from the hallway makes them look like shadow silhouettes, massive, large, bipedal shadow demons simply standing there, looking at him. A few moments later, another human enters with someone behind him, but he can't see. But the one that comes in, as Haktua's eyes begin to adjust from the light, all he hears is, "Where's my money?" Without saying anything, Haktua runs over to his nest and begins to tear it apart, not trying to throw it at anyone, but obviously trying to reach something that's buried inside. He finally reaches a compartment that's in there. You would have to know where to look to find it. He hands over the box and says, "This is all I have." One of the humans reaches out, takes it, picks it up, and then starts flipping through it, looking through everything, and then starts pulling out a certain amount, placing it inside a separate envelope, and then handing the box over, surprisingly, with change in it. The debt is settled, he hears another human say. Shocked, he realizes that he still has enough in the box to return to his home planet, or maybe the colony world. That's when he notices the other figure behind the fifth human. He looks close, having to pinch his eyes almost so that he can see through the bright light behind them. He can see it's his betrothed who actually came in and locked on to one of the four humans that's standing in front of him. The female human sees this, notices, and then gives a strange motion, exposes the front of her teeth, and then wraps one of her arms down around the betrothed, trying to reach down because, well, they are shorter than humans. The female human then said, "She helped settle your debt." Haktua's betrothed then spoke, "They were quickly able to repurpose the land, and it's now a fine home. It's a beautiful home now." With this, Haktua looked confused and pointed at them both and said, "You mean you and that human?" His now former betrothed seemed to find this hilarious and said, "Don't be an idiot. It's her and her mate. It turns out he needs two because he's a really big guy." Haktua was about to pass out from this information. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. But before he actually dropped to all four of his knees, he heard the lead human to speak. "The buildings were a write-off, as we had not checked them out. The cargo is what you just paid for, and what you didn't know is the memory board aboard your destroyed ship was worth another full ship to us. Like was said before, your debt is settled." With those words, all the humans simply turn and walk away, leaving Haktua actually collapsing on the ground. All four of his legs buckle, all four of his arms draped to the side, his antennas simply falling down on the side of his head. He thought for sure he was dead when that door opened. He thought that he would be made an example of. They would show the universe what happens. And that is the moment of realization. The moment where he realized, oh wait, he was the example. He realized that he had been traveling from planet to planet, living in ways that made everyone not understand how he could still be alive for nearly 7 human years, living in constant fear of what was coming, working so much that it seemed to plus up production for others, but others that he worked with thought that he was simply suicidal or something. The story of his life becoming a complete fecal stain would be enough to remind everybody of one simple fact: never, ever go into debt with the humans. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this short story. Now before I go, there's a couple things. One, from here on out, we're going to be playing a little bit of a game, and the game is real simple. See if you can find where syntax is labeled on the thumbnail. It's going to be hidden on most times, so I want to see if you guys can actually figure out where it is. For this current week, if you are the first one to find it, you're just going to get congratulations. If this does take off, you will be getting a shout out at the end of the next video. Now, before I go, I do also need to send out some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes and Erica Gem. As a reminder, if you want to get your shout out at the end of the video, make sure that you send a donation to Syntax via Super Chat or Super Thanks, or whichever super way you want to do it. That will get you a shout out for the entire week, regardless of how much you send in. Oh, and subscribing would be nice. Now that the announcements are over, everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.